Protocol established.
www.shadowtalkradio.com. It's where the unbelievable becomes real. shadowtalkradio.com. The following views and opinions do not necessarily represent those of the Shadow Talk Radio Network, its management, staff, or any affiliates.
This is Dimension X Radio.
With your host, Dr. William Lester, live from Atlanta, Georgia, on the Shadow Talk Radio Network.
And you're live.
And we are live from Atlanta, Georgia. It's the Dr. William Lester Show on the Shadow Talk Radio Network. This is your weekly foray into all things unexplained, unusual, thought-provoking, and fascinating. Please join me at this time and place each week for talk radio for the 21st century. If you'd like to join our live chat, please go to www.shadowtalkradio.com. You can email me directly at Dr. William Lester, that's Dr. William Lester at AOL.com. And you can visit the show site at www.drwilliamlestershow.synthesite.com. Before we bring our guest on tonight, and we're going to have a fantastic show, we're going to be talking to Mr. Stephen Bassett, founder of the Paradigm Research Group, talking about UFO disclosure. But I want to give this week's installment of Today in History, April 4th, 2009. It is the 94th day of the year, which means there are 271 days left in the year. On April 4th, in 1968, civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., aged 39, was shot to death at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. James Earl Ray later pleaded guilty to assassinating King, then spent the rest of his life claiming his innocence before dying in prison in 1998. On this date, in 1818, Congress decided the United States flag would consist of 13 red and white stripes and 20 stars, with a new star to be added for every new state of. On this date in 1841, President William Henry Harrison succumbed to pneumonia 1 month after his inaugural, becoming the first U.S. chief executive to die in office. On this date in 1850, the city of Los Angeles was incorporated. In 1859, 150 years ago, Dixie was performed publicly for the first time by Bryant's Minstrels at Mechanics Hall in New York. The song is popularly attributed to Daniel Decatur Emmett, although his authorship has been called into question. On this date in 1887, Susanna Medora Salter became the first woman elected mayor of an American community, Argonia, Kansas. On this date in 1945, during World War II, U.S. troops on Okinawa encountered the first significant resistance from Japanese forces at the Machinado Line. On this date in 1949, 12 nations, including the United States, signed the North Atlantic Treaty in Washington, forming, of course, NATO. On this date in 1975, more than 130 people, most of them children, were killed when a U.S. Air Force transport plane evacuating Vietnamese orphans crash-landed shortly after taking off from Saigon. On this date in 1983, the Space Shuttle Challenger roared into orbit on its maiden voyage. On this day, 10 years ago, NATO warplanes and missiles attacked an army headquarters, oil refineries, and other targets in and around Belgrade, Yugoslavia. The Colorado Rockies beat the San Diego Padres 8-2 in baseball's first season opener held in Mexico. 1 year ago, on this day, Texas authorities started removing the first of more than 400 girls from a compound built by polygamous sect Lisa Montgomery, and was sentenced to death in Kansas City, Missouri for killing Bobby Jo Stinnett, a mother-to-be, and cutting the baby from her womb. My goodness. Also on this day, pirates seized the French luxury yacht Le Ponant and its 30 crew members off the coast of Somalia. The crew was released a week later. 6 alleged pirates ended up being captured. Among today's birthdays, actress Elizabeth Wilson is 88, poet, author Maya Angelou is 81, Senator Richard Lugar of Indiana is 77, recording executive Clive Davis is 77, band leader Hugh Maskella is 70, author Kitty Kelly 67, actor Craig T. Nelson is 65, actor Walter Charles is 64, actress Caroline McWilliams is 64, and country singer Steve Gatlin of the Gatlin Brothers is 58. Today's thought for the day, appropriately by the late Dr. King, who left us on this day 41 years ago. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And piggybacking on the idea of justice is Mr. Stephen Bassett, who is a leading advocate for ending the 62-year government-imposed truth embargo regarding an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. He is a political activist, lobbyist, commentator, and columnist. He is the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group and the Extraterrestrial Phenomena Political Action Committee. He is the creator of the Paradigm Clock and the executive producer of the X Conference. His work has been chronicled worldwide, and in a few moments it will be chronicled here. In a moment, Mr. Steve Bassett.
This is Steve.
Mr. Bassett, how are you? This is William Lester.
Hey, Will. How you doing? How long is our segment tonight?
Well, we're scheduled to go to midnight.
So it's 2 hours.
Yes.
Okay, so you have me slotted in for the whole 2 hours?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking. Want to get
that will work for you because I know you have a lot of information to share with us.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Okay.
When do we go on the air?
Well, we'll be on in just 10 seconds.
Okay. Oh wow.
Do you need it? Well,
William, I want you to call back this number. It's a landline. We'll have a much better connection. You ready?
Okay.
925. 228. 2618.
26. Okay. We'll get back with you in just a moment.
Bye.
All right. Thank you.
I'll see you when I get back. All righty. Let's do it.
Steve. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, as I introduced him earlier, we are now joined by Mr. Stephen Bassett of the Paradigm Research Group and the executive director, executive producer of the X Conference. Mr. Bassett, thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. I'm very excited about having you on tonight because this has been just a kind of special area of interest to me for a long time. I have heard you give numerous interviews on the subject of disclosure, exopolitics, etc. Now, I know, a lot of our listeners have interests in various areas of the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, etc. Mm-hmm. Could you kind of lay out for the audience what we mean when we talk about, number one, disclosure, and number two, exopolitics?
Okay. I'm sure most of the people in your audience know about the UFO issue. It's yes. Universally known. And it's been around for a very long time. And it's not resolved yet. It certainly goes back to the 40s. And it has a very well-developed history that is easily available on the internet now, frankly. And the long and the short of it is that the UFO phenomena is representative of extraterrestrials engaging us. Some of these sightings, some of these things we're seeing are in fact ET craft. And the government knows this, and the government made a decision back in the 40s to withhold that information, or basically withhold the acknowledgement of it from us for national security reasons. That's the simple statement, right? UFOs, some UFOs are in fact extraterrestrial craft, probably from another planet, most likely. Some think maybe from another dimension or from another time. I won't rule that out, but I'm pretty comfortable with other planets. And the government has certainly known this, and the government elected to withhold it from us. That's, to me, fact. It's not even debatable in my opinion. People debate it all they want. They can debate, whether the Earth is flat. That's their prerogative. But this is fact. It's well established through massive research. Obviously, that's a big deal, and it was not resolvable because the government deliberately made it impossible to resolve it by denying it. And this remained pretty much the status quo until 1991. And when the Cold War ended, the ability for the government to sort of control insiders, to keep people from coming forward, speaking about it, who knew about it, that it worked in government, dropped off dramatically because the Cold War was the number one concern that the government had with respect to ending that truth embargo and revealing the ET presence to people. They were afraid it could destabilize an already very risky and dangerous situation. I can appreciate that. But when the Cold War is over, that goes away. And right away, very early on, various witnesses and government people working that knew about the ET reality started kind of coming out in various ways, some anonymously, some openly, some on the internet, some writing books, speaking, what have you. And so at that point, the disclosure process really gets underway. And what I mean by disclosure process, that is the process leading up to the disclosure of the ET presence to the American people. And by disclosure, I really mean a very formal, structured thing, a capital D disclosure. It's the acknowledgement of the ET presence, meaning ETs are here. It's not the dumping of all the documents out. It's not detailed information about everything that they know, but rather that, yeah, they're here, they're real. That's disclosure. And that the process leading to that gets underway in the early 90s and continues to pick up speed, which is why I call this the era of exopolitics. And the previous period, from 47 to 91, I refer to as the UFO era. The term exopolitics as a umbrella term to put all of this under, right? A sort of a field of study, a reference point, doesn't emerge until 2000, 9 years later, with Alfred Weber's book Exopolitics, in which he takes on the whole idea and talks about galactic governance and what have you, and very aggressively postulates what he thinks is going on. That term was immediately, I immediately seized on that as the term we needed, and almost immediately after learning about it, I got him on, Art Bell. We went on together. In fact, Danny Sheehan was on with us that night. And from that point forward, the concept of exopolitics starts to develop as a term, as a lexicon, as a terminology to use to describe where do you put the government's involvement with this and government actions and the process of the disclosure and the citizen efforts to get the truth out, and where would you put dealing with ETs as a civilization, all of this stuff. It needs a thing. Well, exopolitics, okay. And that's the long and the short of it. And now, 9 years later, 9 years later, since that term sort of emerged, exopolitics gets about 800,000 returns off of a Yahoo search and about 200,000 off a Google search. And it's real close to becoming a formal term in the standard dictionaries. It has quite a few websites developed to it, and so that's it. I'm an exopolitical activist. My primary task is to help, to the extent possible, end the truth embargo the government imposed on this issue, and bring about disclosure of the ET presence to the American people. That's it.
Well, that's that's all you're trying to do. Okay, that's
for right now. Yes.
Yeah. Let me back up, because I like the way you broke up the time periods into the UFO era, and we're now into the the era of disclosure. I want to back up to the UFO era. Do you think when the decision was made, and I guess most of us kind of assumed that this was a decision that was made, post Roswell, that we're gonna keep this secret. We're going to sit on this. Do you think at that point that they ever intended for it to be a secret this long?
I would guess no. I think, first of all, there's some evidence that they made known about the ET reality all the way back in the 30s.
Okay.
But it's thin, it's skimpy, but it's there. We may know more soon, but because there might have been crashes prior to 47. But certainly, whatever they knew, whatever the government might have learned about the ET thing, would have been made secret immediately. That's a given. They were going to do that because they didn't know what they were facing. Of course, back in the 30s, we had certainly late 30s, we had a very dangerous world, and of course, we had a massive war that went on starting in 40. So in Europe, so when things really heated up after the World War II ended and the sightings just exploded, which I think was because the ET craft were all over. I think they, for whatever reason, their presence magnified dramatically. They were clearly going to keep it secret, and but that's not what I would call a truth embargo. That's simply prudence, right? Okay. And I think I like to say that the informal beginning of the truth embargo occurred when General Roger Ramey made the announcement the next day that, in fact, it wasn't a saucer that crashed at Roswell, but it was a weather balloon. That this was kind of the informal, symbolic beginning of the truth embargo. But in fact, I don't believe the formal policy and structured approach to it gets underway until 52, after the Robertson panel. And I think that's the beginning of what I would call a formalized truth embargo, where, okay, we're going to systematically contain this issue, whatever it takes, whatever it costs. And I think that the fundamental justification for their actions, and these were all pretty smart people. The people that were dealing and had to address this issue, but they were very smart, very accomplished people, tested in World War II, non-trivial people, that they did it for, I think they felt the right reasons, that we were facing very, very uncertain times. The nuclear situation was clearly, potentially catastrophic, and they were looking at it from the front end, not from our back end. So they had no idea how bad it would get, but from their point of view, hell, a nuclear war could have started at any time, certainly a war involving nuclear weapons. So they were very worried, and so they needed to know what was going on. They needed to try to understand this phenomena, and until they did, they weren't going to bring it out. So that was not an unreasonable decision, but they faced an enormous problem in that what they wanted to, quote, keep from the American people was flying around at will. And being seen at will, as much as it wanted to be seen. That's a real problem, right? It's an emperor's new clothes problem. It's not like just burying a secret program underground or something and not telling anything about it. You're basically trying to say, look, that thing up in the sky, it's really not there, or don't worry about it. Real problem. So this required a much more complex and elaborate effort on their part, and that's what they created, a formalized program that would contain the issue. And I think that very likely, in their own mind, it was until the Cold War's over. In other words, this Cold War thing, once that's over, I think maybe we can bring this out. But until then, we don't. And did they think the Cold War would last till 1991? I doubt it. I think they probably thought that the Soviet Union would could be persuaded, or would collapse under its own weight, or something would happen. But World War II lasted 4 or 5 years.
Right.
But in fact, it lasted till '91, cost over somewhere between $12 and $20 trillion in modern dollars to prosecute. It was just a catastrophe for the human race. But obviously, we didn't have a nuclear war, so I guess you could say they did a good job. So no, I don't think it would last that long. And then the longer it went on, the longer they had to control this issue and maintain it, the more of a public relations problem it became for them when and if they were going to end that truth embargo, and made it more difficult for them to act.
That's this is an area that has always just been astounding to me, and that is the way that this information has been managed in lieu of or in spite of the large volume of not just sightings, because we live in a technological age now where we have UFOs captured on video cameras, camcorders, cell phone cameras, just about every kind of imaging technology that's out there accessible to the public. We've captured UFOs on. And yet officialdom's response to this flies directly in the face of all that, and it's astounding to me how you have a combination of military and media, and we're always reading. I saw an article just the other day, and the headline, the big splash was, UFO sighting explained. And I can't remember, what the sighting was.
This is a New Jersey hoax.
Is that what it was?
Put on by those two guys, yeah.
Right. And so, and of course, people who are ufologists or people involved in any way with the UFO phenomena are very aware that, yes, hoaxes happen. Yes, misidentifications happen. And of course, but, when it's portrayed as if, okay, here's a hoax, and this explains, the UFO issue is about hoaxes, and of course that's absurd, but that is the kind of, that's the underlying inference that's made, and yet it flies in the face of empirical evidence.
Well, this is a recent event. Yeah, there was a hoax. It's a big story. I think it's irritating to see so many articles. I think I've counted about 45 about this hoax. On the other hand, if the media wasn't covering the issue so much now, there would be very few articles about it. So in a way, it's representative of the fact that the media really is paying attention now, and they're covering it. And it was a hoax. It is a story. Newsweek wrote a piece about it that's just god-awful, but Newsweek has failed miserably on this issue in the past, so I'm not surprised there. But you're right. As I've said many times, if you view this as kind of a propaganda, actually propaganda is not really quite the term. It's a mind control in a way, but mind control is not the right term. If you view this as a systemic misrepresentation of reality, it is the most successful example in human history.
Yes.
But it's not an accident, and it's not just luck. The fact is, there was a confluence of circumstances. What happened was, why this was possible, it was interesting. It's a very interesting story, and this will all get written up in time. Is that the emergence of the ETs in large numbers, and the sighting that took off after the war, virtually parallels the Cold War. It parallels the nuclear age. And so after the war, the United States was faced with a huge problem, and that is, what are we going to do about the Soviet Union, which was a control state, which thrived on secrecy and espionage and what have you. And so it was clear that we needed to build our own espionage intelligence infrastructure and rapidly increase what we had, pass various laws and what have you, in order to address it, which they did. And they passed the National Security Act, and they created the CIA, and not too long after that, they created the National Security Agency, and of course, they beefed up all of the intelligence agencies within the various military services. And they hired lots of people, and they trained them and studied the ways of the dark arts, right? the idea that we'll defeat them at their own game. They also, of course, had to build up a nuclear arsenal, and there was a arms race underway, not just in nuclear weapons, but in everything else. They needed to build underground facilities. They needed to build secret bases. They needed to do a lot of secret stuff in order to, quote, defeat the Soviet Union. And it had to be secret because, obviously, if the American people knew about it, then the Soviets would know about it, and that would defeat the purpose. So they had this complete fundamental rationale for building all of these structures. And the American people understood it completely, and there was no complaint. They had a blank check, by and large. Very rarely were they ever challenged on expenditures or the decisions they were making. Nobody wanted to die in a nuclear war. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, it just so happened, and I don't think it's an accident, because I think that one of the reasons the ETs turned up in such large numbers was because of the dropping of the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the development of the nuclear weapons. But we can't prove that. But in any event, the ET era just really, and the UFO era just explodes on the scene almost the same time in 1947. So the other problem therefore they had, which was, what are we going to do about this? And it turned out that all those structures they were creating, the intelligence skills and the classification skills and the secrecy skills and everything else, and also manipulative skills. Remember, part of espionage and CIA is to manipulate people's thinking, to undermine, their worldview, to get people to overthrow their government. All this kind of manipulation. That all was applicable to a formal effort to, quote, contain the UFO issue. And so they essentially got double duty here. It was 2 for 1. All of the stuff they were building to defeat the Soviet Union could be used and applied to containing the UFO issue at home. So they had unlimited funding, they had structure, they had skilled people, they had the military at their disposal, and so forth. And they used all of those tools, which is why they succeeded. And succeeded quite
Stephen,
well. They were able to contain the issue.
Stephen, we're coming up to our first break. We're at the bottom of the hour, and I want to pick right up on this train of thought because I think it's right where we need to go. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest tonight is Mr. Stephen Bassett, founder of the Paradigm Research Group, and we are talking about UFO disclosure, or what we hope is an upcoming disclosure about what we already know to be true. So please stay with us on the Dr. William Lester Show on the Shadow Talk Radio Network. We'll be right back at you after these messages.
UFO studies, ancient mysteries, paranormal studies, cryptozoological sciences, demonology, extraterrestrial archaeology, temporal sciences, conspiratorial studies. These causes and more can be found at the Institute of Metaphysics from Mysteries Knowledge. Institute of Metaphysics.com.
Spit my life, wonder what to do. 4 years of college and I haven't got a clue. I want the money, but I don't want the job. What I really want to be is a rock and roll star. You may say I won't get very far, but I'm fixed on being a rock
to the show, and my guest is Mr. Stephen Bassett, founder of the Paradigm Research Group. And we left at the bottom of the hour, and Stephen was kind of giving us a thumbnail post-World War II, post-Roswell, and we were well into the Cold War. And basically, the U.S. government, the U.S. military and its allied intelligence agencies went black. And for numerous justifiable reasons, as Stephen laid out. And so we're going to pick back up there. We were talking about the establishment of the CIA, the National Security Agency, the National Security Act, etc. And it all plays a role in the cover-up, in the truth embargo, as Stephen has so often referred to it. So, Stephen, pick us up where we left off.
Well, the point is that in order for them to pull off a manipulation of this magnitude, where you're going to deny or contain something this profound that's an ongoing phenomena that people are seeing all the time and around the world, is not something you can easily do. It requires enormous money, structure, and what have you. And the point I'm making is they had all that, and they didn't have to create it for that. It was already being created for other purposes. And so in terms of disinformation, misinformation, manipulation of the news, things like that, they were in that business already, and were from the beginning. So as they got better and better at dealing with the Soviet Union and running their classified and covert operations, they got better and better at dealing with the UFO issue as well. And they successfully were able to keep the issue from formalizing and from acknowledgement of the ET presence from taking place. Now, obviously, the ETs could have undone that anytime they wanted to, but they chose not to, which is a very interesting exopolitical point that can be discussed. But regardless, they even now today, 62 years since Roswell, there is no formal acknowledgement of this reality, even though the evidence continues to pile higher and higher. And the government's position is still the same. We don't investigate this phenomenon anymore, which is not true. And whatever this thing is we don't investigate, it doesn't pose a threat, which may be true. We better hope is true. That's its position. And of course, that's all about the change. We're now 18 years into the post Cold War period, 18 years in the era of exopolitics. The disclosure movement is growing and growing. It's international in scope. It's been hugely abetted by the internet, which is kind of the killer app for citizen empowerment. And the internet was the final nail in the coffin as far as the truth embargo. There's no way it could survive it. Though it's managed to do pretty well, but it just gets worse and worse. So my view is that the embargo has pretty much run its course and is about to end. And this is I could say a lot on that subject, but I think most people can imagine that, look, you successfully contained this issue for 62 years. That's not bad. Do you really think you could do it for 62 more? and the answer is no.
Nope.
You can't. The Soviet Union had pretty much control over everything in that country. The Communist Party, for instance, and the Soviet state, and they had, they were pretty nasty group of people, and you didn't get out of line with them. You got out of line with them, and you paid a heavy price. And they had huge spying apparatus and whatever, and they were able to keep that all together. In this case, for 83 years, which is a pretty good run, frankly. They kept all the various republics under the Soviet flag. They were able to keep the people under control. They dominated the press and everything else. But this is a very bad way to run a country. It's deceit, and deception, and power, all of that, secrecy. These are not good ways to operate, and they usually collapse under their own weight. They made it for 88 years, and then it completely fell apart. Communist Party disbands, though it's still around, vestiges of it. The republics disband into 14 new countries. The whole thing falls apart. That was a hell of a run, and I can assure you that the Communist Party did not want that to happen, and they did everything they could to prevent it, but they still couldn't stop it. Well, that was the Soviet Union and an 88-year run. The truth embargo is now 62 years old, and I can assure you it's falling apart faster than the Soviet Union was falling apart. So it's about to end, and I believe it'll end very soon. I think it could happen this year. And what I mean by end is very simple, that the United States government will finally acknowledge that, yes, that those things you've been seeing are in many cases alien craft or extraterrestrial craft. There's not humans in them. Those are other kinds of beings. And that acknowledgement is essentially the disclosure event. And it will happen this year, I believe. I believe the window of opportunity is wide open and the pressure is huge. And I am involved in multiple projects right now designed to encourage the government to do it this month of April.
Okay.
The final 30 days of the Obama administration's first 100 days. And
so
it's selected somewhat arbitrarily, but everybody kind of knows about the first 100 days. It's become sort of a political tradition.
Yeah, I want to get into some commentary about this administration, but before I do, I want to get your thoughts on what I consider to be one of the more devious angles of the truth embargo. Aside from political, military, and media, I think one of the areas of difficulty has been co-opting the scientific community or the mainstream scientific community because this is an issue that we have not been able to parse out, in our scientific community, in our universities, with some of our greatest scientific minds in a public forum. And, I think that was done on purpose as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in order to contain the ET issue, they had to co-opt virtually every institution in the country, which is why it's not a good thing. Whatever the rationale was for keeping it secret initially, and we know what the rationale was. They were was national security reasons. It was still not a good thing, and it should have been under the sooner we can get this out, the better. But it's gone on too long because they had to co-opt the media. They had to co-opt academia. They had to co-opt the political process. They had to undermine the authority of the president, undermine the authority of the Congress, and all of this is quite embarrassing and will be embarrassing. I mean, this is not a pretty picture, and history will be fairly hard on them and those that masterminded all this. Though again, there are some rationales for why it had to happen. Still, they're going to get worked over pretty hard by historians and future critics. And what's disturbing, I think, is how effectively they were able to co-opt these institutions. The media laid down right away on the ET issue, which is understandable. Back then, there wasn't nearly as much media. There was very little television, no internet, and it was very easy to go to a few key people, the networks, and say, look, you can't go here. I want you to stay away from it. And if we ridicule it or whatever, you go along with that too, and you do it for your country. And then over time, that became virtually just accepted policy. I don't even know if they even had to renew it in a way. It was like, you don't go there. You don't talk about that. And so the media essentially went along with, in many, many ways, this entire misrepresentation of reality for decades. That's one thing. And the media's job is to get at the facts, is to get information out, to challenge the state. So in a way, it violated most of its fundamental principles. Academia has less of an excuse. Academia is supposed to have, its mandate is to teach the truth, to study the world, and to not be corrupted by politics. And clearly they failed here. But science has always been difficult in that regard. New ideas are treated poorly. The process of peer review and what have you is very imperfect, and there's a lot of academic politics. It's all pretty vicious. So it's never been easy to bring new ideas into play, admittedly. But we're talking about something non-trivial here. We're talking about the most profound information regarding the nature of the world that the human race has probably ever come in proximity to. And one of the most interesting and implicative fields of study, and essentially the entire academic world stood down and said, no, we won't go there. We will ridicule anybody that does. We won't teach it. We won't talk about it. We won't debate it. We will stand down. And I have to believe that somehow academia got that word from the government. Somehow the government impressed that upon them back in the 40s and 50s, again for national security reasons. But maybe not so much, because in the early days, not much was known in general, and so it takes a good while for brand new stuff to start turning up in the academic world, even somewhat for research purposes. So they're sort of, in other words, they run behind the curve by the tradition. So by the time academia might have stepped into the game, when we started to get lots of information started accumulating in the late 50s, the government had sufficiently ridiculed and undermined the whole idea, the whole concept in general, that just on the basis of CYA and peer pressure, academia was kind of put off by it. And then, of course, as the years went by, the ridicule factor grew and grew and grew, and academia was able to say, well, we don't want to embarrass ourselves, we don't want to go there. Well, and so no amount of evidence, no amount of events could prompt academia to break ranks, and they lockstepped virtually. I'm talking all 5,000 colleges and universities in the United States, with a few notable but modest exceptions. The entire structure, which is vast, lockstep all the way through the second half of the 20th century, refusing to teach it, debate, and discuss it in any meaningful way, which is a massive systemic failure, which they have to answer for.
Look at the SETI folks, who are all out of mainstream academia, every one of them, and yet these are folks who believe that there is intelligent life in the universe, and they absolutely will not deal with the UFO information.
It's a wonderful story. The SETI story needs to be really written up thoroughly. Well, let's be clear. Even though SETI is considered mainstream, the academic world looked down on those people that would even go there, right? And that was brought out very nicely in the movie Contact, made on the book by Carl Sagan and Ann Troyan. And Ellie took a lot of abuse, the woman character in the movie Contact. But nevertheless, I mean, it's still they were held in much higher esteem than somebody who actually going out and looking at UFO sightings and cases. Any academic in that realm was a real problem. But so it was still not a particularly comfortable place to go, but didn't pose any threat to academia, and SETI didn't operate within academia. But it gets worse, because the SETI program was a front operation of the government from the beginning. It was virtually set up for propaganda purposes.
To not look at UFOs.
Exactly. But more importantly, one of the principal problems that they faced to run the truth embargo and contain the issue was the pressure from people. Just from the public, meaning, what are you going to do? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And they had a lot of it. I mean, there's plenty of pressure, and there was news coverage back in the 50s and 60s, and there were flaps from time to time, and there was plenty of embarrassing and awkward moments.
Sure.
And so they did everything they could to manage the issue. And one of the things they did, which was quite ingenious and quite appropriate, was, okay, well, look, if we could set up a program that's, quote, looking for extraterrestrial life in the galaxy, that takes a lot of pressure off us. When people come to us and say, well, why don't you care about this phenomenon that's going on? We care about this idea of ETs. We're looking for them. We're looking for their signals in the sky. So leave us alone, right? Yeah, but the saucer landed in my backyard. You were drinking heavy that night. There's no ET here. Right. They can't get here because of the speed of light barrier. But we're looking for their signals. So it essentially took a lot of pressure off them to have a program like that in place. And so they created one. NASA funded it through the NASA budget. And it did. It took pressure. And whenever the ET issue might come up, they could point to SETI, and SETI people could turn up from time to time and talk about it, and it just made everything seem all hunky-dory. Now, eventually the government, the Congress, thought this whole thing was a joke, and they ended the funding by law.
Right.
And they canceled any government funding of SETI. Not surprisingly, almost instantly, private funding turned up immediately, right? So SETI went right on. And in most people's eyes, continued to be a government function. Most people didn't know the difference and didn't care. So it would continue to be a front operation, taking pressure off of the issue. Meaning, yeah, we think ETs would be an amazing thing. We're looking for their radio signals. Now, whether the people that worked in it knew that, I think they're pretty smart people. If they didn't suspect it, then they really weren't paying attention. But the front operation continued, and eventually the government sort of got back into it in a way. And I think NASA has a connection to SETI now. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's some shared funding again. But the whole thing is a ruse. It's a joke because the government knew there were ETs here back in the 40s. And so, at minimum, the government's watching this whole SETI program go on, knowing that, well, you don't have to look for signals; you're right up the street.
Right.
And so that's massive manipulation of people and money and the press and everything else. It's a front operation, and it became a debunker operation where frequently, and Shostak is the most guilty of this. The SETI people would come forward not just to talk about their program, but to debunk the efforts of the ET UFO researchers to deal with the terrestrial reality going on. And that really irritates me, and I've told Shostak this on several occasions in writing, that, don't do that, because if you do, we're gonna hit you. We're gonna hit you hard, because that's even worse. So the whole thing is bogus. Now, they did build a lot of radio telescopes, and maybe they are searching for signals. So that's not, quote, bogus. And those radio telescopes will have other uses and will get used. Radio telescope and radio astronomy, very valuable and very important research tool, no question about it. But in academia, of course, it kind of took them off the hook too, right? Well, there is research going on there. We don't need to do anything. But it's all a joke. It's all a ruse, and it's not cool. It's a hoax. You talk about hoaxes. There's a hoax. The SETI, this hoax that those guys did was nothing compared to the SETI hoax.
Well, I mean, I think if you're saying to me that you're interested in alien life, but you're not interested in UFOs, well, that's nonsense. I mean, because you can't.
The UFO phenomena.
Yeah.
And the research and everything. To say that is good. It's totally hypocritical and it's meaningless. But again, from the standpoint of propaganda and the truth embargo, it makes total sense. So in a way, my hat's off to them. They did a tremendous job. They fooled everybody, or they didn't fool everybody, but they fooled a lot of people.
Well, where will Seth Shostak and others of his ilk be on the day of disclosure? I mean, where are they going to be left? I mean, because it's going to be like, because they've dug in on this issue. Okay.
Oh, of course.
And so there's unless there's, some angle to this that we can't figure out, they're going to look like fools.
I don't envy them. In the age of the internet and the age of cable television, if you make a fool of yourself, boy, and you're public, it's a public thing.
Yeah.
It can be pretty hard on you, and I have a feeling it is going to be hard on them. Jill Tarter, I'm sure, is a perfectly nice woman, but she runs SETI, and she had the great misfortune of turning up in the documentary that was put together by Peter Jennings' documentary team.
Oh, yes.
His company. Peter Jennings reporting, Seeing is Believing. And it was really kind of sad. As part of the, quote, counter response to it, she's interviewed, and she tells this absurd story about how one night she and her husband were out, and because of the lighting and the clouds and something, they mistook the moon for a UFO.
I remember that interview. Yeah.
And I'm going, well, yeah. And then, of course, Shostak has been debunking the efforts of the researchers for some time. So, yeah, instantly they look like fools, and the whole SETI program sort of gets seen in the proper light. One of two things will happen. One, if they're smart, they'll just sort of quietly drift away into the background and find some academic pursuits to keep them busy and keep their mouth shut if they're smart. But humans being humans, it's not going to surprise me if some of the SETI people try to immediately recast themselves as, well, we've been looking for ETs all this time, signals, so we're really experts on extraterrestrials. And so we're, now that we know ETs are real, let me tell you, we're experts on that, and you come to see us. Don't go to those UFO people because they're all nuts. They may try to do that. That would be a big mistake on their part. While I understand it's natural for humans to act that way, because of the internet and the ability to respond to that kind of thing almost in real time, if they do that, they're going to get virtually carved up like some shrimp at a Benihana dinner. So that's my suggestion to them, is to go quietly away and maybe apologize, maybe not. If they really feel they were duped, if they really feel that, I spent years looking for this and you're telling me you knew ETs were real in 1947, they might become activists and start challenging the government's program there and the whole idea, and they might then become useful and help to prevent this kind of thing happening in the future. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one angle, they could very well take the angle of, kind of pretending to be outraged. That, oh my God, we were, we were fooled and we were lied to, and we should have known better. We should have listened to the Stephen Bassetts and the Stanton Friedmans, etc.
Yeah.
But the idea again, I'm interested in alien life, but UFOs are nonsense. It's just not a tenable position, I think, at this point. If you look at
some time.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the balance of evidence, is there more evidence to suggest that alien life is visiting Earth, or is there more evidence that alien civilizations out in space are going to be communicating with us with some kind of space-age radio technology? And of course,
there's none.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, technically there's none, but here's the irony. Because of the nature of the embargo, there's no question in my mind that if SETI had, and a lot of people think they have, if SETI had ever actually encountered any structured signals, intelligent signals, there's no way they would have revealed it.
But they also deny that.
Yeah, they deny that too. But believe me, there's no way the government would have allowed it. So again, it's all part of the game. It's the truth embargo is what it is. It's kind of a game, and then they refer to espionage as spy games and so forth, and that's kind of what it is. And it was practiced on our soil. It was practiced with our money. We were denied the truth, and a lot of waste occurred because of it. But that's in the past. I'm wanting to look forward. Okay. We have enormous problems we're facing. Mm-hmm. The truth is superior to lies. We've got to stop trying to operate our government based on lies. Lies only provide short-term advantages, very long-term, very destructive. And so, forgive and move on. I mean, I think that I'm hoping that, in general, that people will be relatively understanding and that they will encourage the people that were managing the truth embargo to come forward and tell their stories. We need to know the full history of this time. We need to know all of the techniques that were used and all the things they did. Was the National Enquirer, which was created by a CIA guy, in fact, formally used to ridicule the issue? Did they also use the Weekly World News for that? How much manipulation of the press? Did they have formal agreements with certain of the key networks? All of this, we need to know that, so that it really never happens again. I don't see any reason to ever do this again at any time, as long as the United States or any free nation. We know why totalitarian states do this, but in terms of free countries, there's no reason to ever do this again. I don't care. There is no rationale that justifies it. And so one of the first things we have to do once disclosure takes place is begin the process of reforming our institutions and our military and our intelligence so that they do the job they're supposed to do and never get this far out in left field.
I've often played a little mind game with self-proclaimed debunkers / skeptics, and I call it the $1 million bet. And I would ask them, I would say, let's, pretend I've got a suitcase here full of $1 million cash, And then on my desk, I have an envelope, and inside that envelope is the definitive answer to UFOs contained within the envelope. And I say, would you bet this $1 million that UFOs are real alien spacecraft, or are UFOs nonsense? Which way would you bet? If this $1 million can be yours, you see. And I can't tell you how many self-proclaimed debunkers just kind of, leaned their heads to the side and said, I'd bet UFOs are real. And you know what I mean?
Well, an easier way to say this is this: I think if we could poll all the skeptics privately, in other words, if they could answer a completely private, secure poll about their views, we discover, I think we'd be quite shocked.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I have no doubt.
A number of years ago, there was a poll done of scientists where they were asked this question in a format that allowed them anonymity, and the percentage that believe ETs were real is pretty high. And this was quite a while. This was back, I think, in the 80s or late 70s. I'm sure it's even higher now. But again, the reason the public and private positions of people are different is because of the embargo and the ridicule factor. It's like back in Germany, back in the 30s. If you privately polled people, well, what do you think of Jews? What do you think of your Jewish neighbors? Do you think they're this or that or whatever? They would have gotten one response. If they were asked publicly, they got quite another. In other words, you have to have a completely different public persona and view on something because the government has distorted reality and ridiculed and ghettoized an issue. I call it the political ghettoization of ufology.
That's right. We're at the top of the hour. We're at the top of the hour, Stephen, so we're going to take another break. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest is Mr. Stephen Bassett. We're all over the Disclosure Project, and when we come back, I want to get into the current administration and where we stand politically and socially in terms of disclosure. Is it about to happen? Is it going to be put off? We're going to get Mr. Bassett's take on it. Hopefully, we're going to get the truth on this issue once and for all. This is the Dr. William Lester Show, and we will be right back with you after these messages.
The following views and opinions do not necessarily represent those of the Shadow Talk Radio Network, its management, staff, or any affiliates.
And we are back live on the Dr. William Lester Show on the Shadow Talk Radio Network. My guest is Mr. Stephen Bassett, and we are discussing disclosure. I guess it's important to point out, with respect to the issue of disclosure, that we have a new administration that has come to power. President Obama has certainly changed the landscape. Certainly, the perception of the United States has changed, or is changing worldwide. There has been in many quarters a kind of renewed sense of optimism. Of course, I know that there are a few people around that are kind of wringing their hands for one reason or another. But be that as it may, we are in a new era of American government and politics. When President Obama came into office, obviously he assumed the mantle of a tremendous economic crisis, which he is, currently in the midst of dealing with. And the outcome of that, no one can tell. Certainly, he seems to be equipped intellectually to be able to deal with whatever could confront a president. So from that vantage point, Stephen, where do we stand on the prospect of disclosure?
I'm going to give you the short answer here. I've got a 2-hour answer, and clearly we can't do that. The truth embargo is now 62 years old. It really wasn't. There was not very little likelihood of it ending prior to the Cold War, so the door doesn't really open even a crack until 91. We're now 18 years since then. One of the key factors in executing this historical maneuver, meaning the disclosure maneuver, where you say, yes, there are ETs here, for the U.S., for the military and intelligence managers of the issue, who were essentially making decisions about it, was the president. The first George Bush presidency, 41, H.W. Bush, he would have been acceptable as a disclosure president, but the Cold War didn't end until late in his term. There was a Kuwait problem, that developed, and then he lost to Clinton. Clinton was not acceptable to be the disclosure president. They certainly did everything they could to get him out of there in 4 years. They didn't, because he's a very good politician. He was then followed by Bush. Gore, who lost to Bush, I think would have been acceptable as disclosure president, but he lost. And George Bush, the son, was not acceptable as a disclosure president. He probably should have lost in 2006. Kerry, I think, would have been acceptable, and so would have Bob Dole. But obviously they did not win. The Bush won, and he was not acceptable. So there's 18 years right there. So up comes the election in 2008. And I believe that Obama was acceptable to them, and so was McCain. And so really, finally, they had two candidates, one of which is going to win. And so right there, the window of opportunity opens. Secondly, 18 years on, the evidence for the ET reality is just massively increased, and the pressure on the government is increased, and the internet, of course, is exponentially growing, and the ET UFO issue is very well represented there. So not only was the window opening, but it needed to open wide, and I think they knew that. So I felt that this was their best opportunity to get this over with, and that's point number one. Point number two, they face certain logistical and time sensitive issues here. First, the new administration, if it's going to disclose, needs to do it pretty quickly, because at some point the embargo becomes their embargo, right? In other words, if you see somebody murder somebody next door, murder your neighbor, and you know who it is, and you don't say anything. After a while, you start to become culpable, don't you?
Right.
You're hiding. In fact, if you're interviewed by the police and you don't tell them the truth, it's called withholding evidence. You've committed a felony.
Right.
So the fact is that early on, it's all good. I've learned about this. We're telling you about this now, and people go hurrah. But at some point, it starts to become your embargo, and now you've got that public relations problem. So it needed to be early, and the first 100 days is sort of traditionally known to be the high watermark for political capital. And you come in with this mandate and all that, and if you're going to do something big, you need to do it in the first 100 days. In fact, we're seeing that right now. Mm-hmm. So that was point number two. And the other time-sensitive point, and not non-trivial, was this: that there are growing indications that other countries are not willing to go along with this embargo any longer. They're taking unilateral actions and doing things which are putting even more pressure on the United States. And so one of the important issues is the concern that another country will snatch this legacy right out from under us. Mm-hmm. France is a possibility. The UK is a possibility, as is China. And so they wait one day too long, and, well, France gets the golden ring. And we're still sitting there holding a bag of lies, aren't we? Not good. And the U.S. Prestige and influence in the world has been taking heavy hits the last 10 years, and that would just be one more. So they really need to get it done. So that's point number two. Point number three is simply this: knowing this and anticipating this, we started pressing very heavily, and I say we, I mean all the various activists in this field. I'm pretty much familiar with all of them. Right. Started putting a lot of pressure on the media regarding the candidates and regarding the campaign, going all the way back, the very interminably long campaign for presidency that started early in 2008, and built up a lot of press and a lot of awareness on the issue all through that campaign. And there are many, many things that happened. But the principal focus was on the fact that the Democrats had a very powerful connection to the UFO issue through the Rockefeller Initiative.
Right. It
was Lawrence Rockefeller's attempt to try to get Clinton to be the disclosure president, essentially. Though they didn't use those terms, and this went on from 93 to 96. Of course, Clinton did some things, but he didn't act on that. And if you want to know about that, I've got a very substantial section on my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org, devoted to the Rockefeller Initiative, and there's quite a bit at Grant Cameron's website, presidentialufo.com, or just Google Rockefeller Initiative, and those sites come up right away, right to the top, and you can quickly review that. In fact, as I announced on Coast to Coast AM last week, Grant Cameron's book, Grant Cameron and I are completing a book which is currently titled U.S. Presidents and UFOs, The Secret Story, which is essentially Grant Cameron's research into the intersection of U.S. presidents and this issue going back to Truman and possibly even to Rockefeller. And we announced last week that, in fact, we have been signed with Overlook Press in New York to do this book this year.
Good.
And it's a substantial New York publisher run by Peter Mayer and distributed through Penguin Books. And we're going to be looking to interview a whole lot of very famous people with respect to this issue pretty soon. But in any event, so Grant and I have both been paying intense attention to the political connections to this issue going back some time, particularly the presidency. So the Democrats are substantially connected to the issue through the Rockefeller Initiative. And knowing that, we really hammered the issue very hard, and of course Obama won. So we were immediately looking for any hints or clues that, in fact, the Democrats at the deeper what we'll call policy level, the think tank level, where they cook up what they want to do when they're in office. They don't tell you, but they do this in secret. What are their plans? Is disclosure part of it? And we were looking for indicators, and indicators are turning up all over the place. First of all, he appointed John Podesta to be his head of transition, a very key position, which helped define the administration and select other people. Podesta not only was a key advisor to Clinton during the Rockefeller Initiative, but later after Clinton left office, he publicly called for the release of all UFO documents on several occasions, and that's on YouTube. You can actually go see some of those comments. Pretty significant thing on the part of John Podesta, who is currently running the think tank Center for American Progress. He then attempted to appoint Bill Richardson to the Secretary of Commerce position. He had to withdraw because of an investigation ongoing, which I think is not going to hurt him, but it was going to complicate the nomination process. And Richardson had come out in 2004 and said that the Roswell explanation by the government didn't hold water, and that we ought to release all the records about that.
Right.
And he has strong ties to the Clinton administration and the Clintons. He was appointed ambassador to the UN by Clinton. He was appointed Secretary of Energy by Clinton, and he knew about the Rockefeller Initiative. Then they appointed Leon Panetta to be the head of the CIA. Leon Panetta was the chief of staff to Bill Clinton during the Rockefeller Initiative. Then they appointed Hillary Clinton, or before that, they appointed Hillary Clinton to be the Secretary of State. And, of course, she not only knew about the Rockefeller Initiative, she was involved in it, and she met with Rockefeller at his ranch. These are extraordinary selections, all connecting the Obama administration back to the Rockefeller Initiative, back to the issue. He put key, strong people in at defense and his national security advisor, placating the military intelligence people. He brought in a Nobel physicist to head energy, brought in another physicist to be his science advisor and head of OSDP, Office of Science Technology Policy. All of these things fit a disclosure scenario so tightly that the odds of it being a coincidence are simply lottery level odds. So the signs are all there. And then, of course, one of the hallmarks of his plans as president is to bring open transparency to the government, open government, transparent government, which is, of course, the key theme of one of his major backers, which is George Soros, who funded the Center for American Progress to the tune of $6 to $9 million. So the writing's all over the wall that they want to end this embargo, which, of course, completely gives credence to their open, transparent government theme. But then there's another factor, and this is the payoff. This is the $1 million payoff. My view is, and we don't know enough to be absolutely certain, but I am confident, and I think a growing number of people are confident, that the government has had crashed vehicles in their possession going back decades to the 40s and possibly even sooner, but certainly the 40s, and that they have made every effort to try to understand the technology in those vehicles, to learn the propulsion, the energy systems. They've had unlimited funding. They've had complete secrecy, access to their best minds, and I believe they have made substantial progress. I believe there's evidence that they have flown their own versions of these craft over military bases. And so the U.S. government, right now, technology that could transform our world, particularly once it's been fully developed, and all of the great minds of our societies are able to apply their thinking to it. This technology could transform the planet, helping to solve a host of hugely difficult problems. And the key techs we're talking about are the propulsion and antigravitic system, and then the energy systems that make those craft do what they can do. And right now, all of that technology is hostage to the truth embargo. It's simply not available for public use and while that embargo is in place. And so you don't get the tech until you end the embargo. And if anybody who's not been living in a cave for the last 20 years knows that we are facing real, serious problems, economically, physically, environmentally, and most of these problems require technological solutions. Right? We're all not going to go live in tents in the woods.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And jobs aren't going to be made. We're not going to be selling beads on the side of the road for jobs. We need new tech, new businesses, new development, and these techs, this ET-based tech, could change all of the equations, and we simply have to have it.
Well,
I think the Obama administration knows that.
When what you're saying kind of dovetails very well, for example, with the apparent decline of the U.S. auto market or U.S. auto industry I've heard it said on many occasions, we've all had this discussion about oil. But I've heard it said, it's not really the oil at issue. It's the combustion engine.
It's many things. It's many things. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was about to say, of course, I don't pretend to be an engineer of any kind, but, we've tapped out, I think. We've maxed out on what we can do with the combustion engine. And that if some new form of energy, of propulsion, of readily accessible energy isn't tapped into, we're going to be spinning our wheels, and we're going to be spinning them slowly. That's somewhat true. I mean, I won't disagree, but there's really a far more rich and complex story here. What we're going to discover is that the history of the second half of the 20th century is radically different than we thought it was. And there's a lot of people who are going to really be irritated by that. But what can I say? That's life. Yeah.
And we're going to learn, I think, some truths which are pretty stunning. And I'm going to throw out a few
okay.
Examples, which they prove to be wrong. I could be wrong. What can I say? When you're talking about secretive and sequestration of information and manipulation of information, it makes it hard to be able to know for certain about anything. But within those constraints, this whole idea of peak oil is bogus. There's always been plenty of oil. I knew that a long time ago.
Right.
But there's no benefit, there's no upside to the industry to in any way let that be known. You want people to think it's scarce. If they think it's scarce, then you can sell at a higher price.
Supply and demand.
Secondly, and more importantly, I think high-end people in the industry know the ET presence is real and know that ET tech is eventually coming out. And so the whole game was sell as much oil as you can for as many dollars as you can, because eventually the games are going to be up. Don't drill for more. Don't overplay that hand, because that money is basically wasted. Don't build any new refineries. Blame the environmental movement for that, though the environmental lobby not nearly as powerful as the oil lobby, in my opinion, because all those refineries are just billion-dollar white elephants that eventually are just going to be turned into scrap metal and just help lower the cost. You want to sell it for as much money as you can. Don't build any more nuclear power plants, because of those will eventually be giant billion-dollar white elephants. Blame the environmental lobby for that. And so the history of energy, the history of the development of tech, and all that in the 20th century is essentially bogus. And one of the reasons that it's not what it is because key people in industry, people in the know, people with military and intelligence connections, and just powerful people that get information in ways that you and I can't even dream of, they know the reality of this. And
well,
they
look at
make
the auto
decisions
industry.
about their businesses.
Look at the auto industry. What have we heard in recent weeks? Oh, it's all because of the UAW. It's the UAW. It's the UAW. Please.
The auto industry may or may, the auto industry is kind of a small player here. We're talking about macroscopic stuff. The auto industry is another industry. They may or may not known about the reality of the 20th century. They made a lot of bad decisions, but clearly the oil-based economy, which was being maxed out, clearly dissuaded them to some degree from getting away from that. And so they continue to build cars that way, and there's very little innovation. But in a bigger scale, it doesn't really matter because all this is going to change. But there are huge implications for the people. Now, again, I'm talking about the vested interests of very wealthy, powerful people. Right. By and large, the interest of the average person, the middle-class person, and certainly second and third world nations were not considered hardly at all. The only consideration they had was if we let the ET truth out, it could destabilize the world politically, and we could have a nuclear war. Of course, that kind of went away in 91 anyway. But by and large, most of the people making the decision do not care at all about you or I or the middle class or Bangladesh or anything. They pretty much care about their power and their money and keeping it. Well, that's going to change, and I think people are wised up to that. The Internet is empowering people by the hundreds of millions, and I think the day of the powers that be is maybe coming to an end. Even the Bernie Madoffs in this world are learning that. So what it comes down to now is that we have to have that technology, and
Stephen,
when it comes out, are you with me? Did you lose me? I've still got a connection here.
Okay, hang on a second, William. Let me get some music.
No, I just lost the
here.
connection. No problem. Yeah.
Okay, hang on a second here. Oh. All right. And okay, I lost William. Okay, I'll tell you.
You got me.
All right, one moment here. William, where are you, William? I apologize for this. It's called internet radio.
Sure. No problem.
Okay, there we go. Now.
Hello?
Hi, William.
Okay, we got him.
And I've got
Calling back.
Stephen back now. Hello.
Paradigm Research Group, this is Steve.
All
Hey,
right.
Steve, we lost you. I guess.
He's trying to pull me back in. He's trying to pull me back in right now. He lost you too. So
Okay.
I've hung up. Tell him
Okay.
I've gone ahead and hung up, and to simply recall me back on that line, that fax line, when he's set up again.
Is that on the not the 8344?
The 925-228-2618.
Okay.
Okay, we'll
call
get
you right
get
back.
you right back there.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. William, let's go ahead and pull him. Let me go ahead and.
All righty.
All righty then. William, are you still with us? You know what? It's one of those nights. You know what? I think that Mercury's in retrograde again. That's what I think.
Was it recently in retrograde?
I believe it was. Matter of fact, that's my version of the paranormal Murphy's Law.
Mm-hmm.
So, one moment here. Where's he at here? Okay, well, I'm going to do, Stephen, is I'm going to go ahead and disconnect again. I'm going to get hold of William, then we'll call you right back. All right?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, now, William. So, all right. Contact. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. We got William coming back right now.
And we're back on. Is Stephen with us? Are you with us, Stephen?
Not yet, he's not. Hang on a second, William.
Oh, okay.
I'm about
That's
to get
okay.
him
That's
back. I'm sorry, William. I don't know what happened because I still had him. I lost you, but I had him.
Oh, when you talk disclosure, you have these problems.
Yes. Okay, so it's a 925 number, right?
Right.
Okay, one moment here. And I'm adding
We're
him
gonna-
back now.
We won't do the last break. We'll just go on through to 12.
All right.
Yep.
You're in charge, my friend.
Thank you.
Here. And I'm just a humble servant.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Stephen, are you with us?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, you talk disclosure, and all kind of things happen with the phone lines, don't they?
You never know.
Yeah. I mean,
Whoever's doing this, I don't know these two gentlemen. I've never met them before in my life.
That's
That's right. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Yeah. You don't know us.
Yeah, it's right. But no, seriously, I know that having listened to a number of these type of conversations on radio programs, I do know that from time to time you have inexplicable telecommunications issues. But nevertheless, it's just a little another nugget of potential evidence that what we're talking about is absolutely valid. And when you talk about subjects like energy and the oil industry and all of this kind of thing and reshaping the global landscape, I'm guessing that there's a lot of people who are not quite ready for that to happen.
Yeah, but there's quite a few that are, and their numbers are growing, and the others are getting smaller. So it's and I wouldn't worry about harassment and this kind of stuff. I think that stopped a number of years ago. It's not a problem anymore.
Okay. So if you're right, we're right on the edge of essentially changing the world as we know it.
Biggest event in human history, in my opinion.
Well, without a doubt. And I mean, we look at, we look at television programs like Star Trek, which, in my view, are more than just television programs. And you see that, for mankind to be exploring the galaxy in starships, obviously there was a sea change. Humanity changed, the world changed. And if you're right, we are on the precipice of that change, are we not?
I don't think it should surprise anybody. A lot of the kids today, 15, 16-year-old kids, the idea of going to space, being in space, is to me, it's no more a big deal than going to the mall. But we represented it all in movies to the ultimate degree, with the quality of graphics and special effects we have now. It's like you're literally there. But the fact is that we're being engaged by extraterrestrials, and so obviously something big's in the works. There's a reason they're here. We're going to find out. So as I was saying before, I believe the window is open. All the indicators are there. The administration is going to do it. I picked April because that's the last 30 days of the 100 days. Virtually the last 30. April 1 to April 30 is, in fact, the last 30 days of the first 100 days of the Obama administration.
All right.
And I think that's when they should do it. I will admit, though, that the amount of stuff they had to acclimate to coming in was, even though they started as fast as any administration ever, is quite huge. And they're still making state visits. They're still having to address some immediate economic stuff. It's pretty grave. So it's possible that they're not going to make it in April, but they can't wait much longer. May, I would say May. They don't really go past May 31, May 30. Because we're going to start putting pressure on them too. I mean, there's plenty of things we have in the works ready to go. Since the election, PRG has launched a number of projects. Facts on Washington, which is still underway. Okay. Which is home-based at factsonwashington.org. We organized an effort to start putting faxes and emails into the letters and emails. There was no fax number, into the transition headquarters of the new president, as well as the senatorial office. And thousands of emails and letters were sent without question. And then we went to phase 2 after the election, January 21, and it was faxes, letters, and emails into the White House, which has a address, a fax number, and a public fax number, and an email address, email page on their website, as well as a comment line. And so thousands of letters and faxes and emails have been going in since Obama went into office on January 21. So that's been underway and still going on. And there's a Facebook page for that called Million Facts on Washington. And if you're on Facebook, you can go there and get all the information. And we want to keep sending those letters and emails and faxes into the White House all the way through the end of this month and probably into May as well. So we've gotten that out. Then the X conference, which is planned for right in the middle of this month, in 2 weeks, April 17 to 19, we're bringing in most of the activists in the field, and Edgar Mitchell will be making a presentation on this issue, one of his most comprehensive to date. Nick Pope is coming in from the UK, talking about all the developments there. And all the information on that is at x-conference.com. Registrations can be done online or on site right there at the conference. We're hoping it's a strong turnout. I've sent out invitations to the entire House and Senate to send the staffers to come, and the political press are going to get hit really hard with a whole series of press releases. So we're expecting the X conference to draw a lot of attention to the issue. And of course, the book has just been announced. U.S. Presidents and UFOs: The Secret Story. And when we announced it, I'll repeat what I said then, that we a lot of pretty powerful people are in this book, particularly with respect primarily to the Clinton administration and the Carter administration. And we hope to interview them to get their side of the story. So we have plans to attempt to interview Jimmy Carter and Marcia Smith of the Library of Commerce, formerly of the Library of Congress, Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State Clinton, former President Clinton, John Podesta, Bill Richardson, Leon Panetta, Sheila Woodnall, Melvin Laird. I think you've heard of these people.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to try to interview them, get their side of the story. And so that's happening. Meanwhile, the UK is releasing more documents. Denmark just released thousands of documents. Canada's continue to release documents. So the pressure is mounting, and we have other projects in the works to continue to bring even greater pressure on the administration to act. I think they will act. I hope they'll do it soon.
So,
and we'll get this done.
So, Stephen, now walk us through how you expect the Obama administration to unfold this, because, are they going to do a press conference, a series of press conferences? Because, see, once he utters the word ET presence, it's going to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. CNN,
the whole month,
yeah. So, how do you foresee them playing this out?
If I had been advising him, if he had hired me to advise him on this whole thing from the beginning, I would have done this. I'd have appointed Podesta to the transition team, and I would have briefed some people in very carefully right during the transition period that we plan to do this. I would then have probably asked Podesta to be the liaison with the military intelligence management committees on this issue, what I call cross-agency committees, and have him make the overtures to them and meet with some of their people secretly by necessity. Secrecy is not good in general, but there is a time when it's unavoidable. In the early days of administration, to sort of get some parameters set up and feel them out and what they need and other things like that. Right. And be very careful, because if this leaks, once it leaks, it's all over. So they have to act fairly quickly. This all has to be done fairly fast. I'd have Podesta do that. I think he's the right guy. And then once the military intelligence cross-agency committees are comfortable, then the decision to proceed would be made. And then they'd have to move pretty quickly so as not to have it leak ahead of time, to create a whole lot of confusion and disruption. And they would then very quickly move to bring certain people together for a major press conference. They wouldn't be given a lot of notice, but they'd be given enough notice to prepare themselves. And they would then call for some airtime, network airtime, for a special announcement. That this has happened in the past. I think you're aware of this. This has happened a number of occasions. And very likely they would not give the reason for it, other than that. It might probably say national security issue or related issue. And that would get out in the net pretty fast, and you can be sure to get a damn big audience for it that night. And or it could be afternoon. It might very well be during the day. And so we would wait for the time, and they would cut to the White House, the Oval Office, and the president would address the people. And if I were advising him, I would not advise him to make the announcement at that point. I would advise him to be very brief and to the point, and simply say that important information is about to release to the American people. This will be done at a press conference immediately following this announcement. My comments. That the information being released has been fully authorized by me, and I am fully support this. And there will be much more coming from the White House regarding this in the very near future. And therefore, I now will, and so at this, we will shift to that press conference, and so it'll be it. Short, sweet, and then it would shift to the press conference, set up some appropriate location. Okay. And the press conference would there'd be people there, the press would be there, they've already been called, come in, important deal. Not a lot of notice, again, because I think the press, when they learn there's going to be a conference, they want to know what it's about, and they will dig hard. But there will be a press conference, the press will be there, and there will be a moderator, and this is kind of the key person in a way. They will select a moderator of this conference that is the person that will make the announcement. And this will be the right person, the person that people would want to hear this from. And this person, the moderator of this press conference, will be the one, probably not a political person, that will make the announcement to the world's people, to the American people, that yes, there is an extraterrestrial presence that has been engaging us for some time, that we have known about it since such and such time, and that we, for national security reasons, withheld the facts of this from you. But we believe that it is now appropriate for you to know this, and we are telling you today. And then they will introduce some notable people on the panel, on the press panel, the press conference panel, who will be given an opportunity to make a brief statement about it, meaning their reaction, right? All relatively orchestrated, but nevertheless, their reaction, their comments from their perspective. And there'll be people representing military, intelligence community, religious community, civic community, some public leaders, what have you, civilian leaders, NGOs, science, and they would each give a brief statement, and then they would take questions from the press. One of the things the moderator would say, I think, before they get underway with the press questions is that by no means are they going to be able to release large amounts of information today. That some of this will remain classified for some time to come. But the information will be coming out. There will be information coming out, and the whole picture will start to flesh out over the immediate coming weeks. But we will answer as many questions as possible today, but understand that some will remain classified, and there are areas we cannot go. And then we will proceed, and at that point we will be formally in the post-disclosure era, and the game will be afoot, and it will be a fascinating, complex game in which the government is on one side, the scientific community, the press, and the American people are on the other side. The one side wants to release so much information under a certain time frame, and the other side wants so much information under a certain time frame, and it will go back and forth, and it will be incredibly intense. And as this goes underway, and there will probably be some leaks and some false documents and other stuff. There'll be some game going on and some nonsense. But overall, over a period of weeks and months, the information will come out. How much and how fast? Well, that depends on how that game is played and how determined the American people are, how determined the media is, how determined the government is to hold fast. But we will learn more and more and more. And in time, we will learn it all. But how long that will be, I don't know. That's how I think it will happen. That's how I think it should happen. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't happen that way in the United States soon, in this month or next month, I believe it's very likely that sometime this year another nation will do it. And they will follow the similar protocol. And they will announce to their people, and by extension the people of the world, that the ET presence is real. So it's up to the U.S. Do they want to lead or do they want to follow?
Well, what in your mind will be what I like to call the day after effect? Because there's going to be certain reactions coming from the public. And, I guess, all of us kind of pigeonhole ourselves into one category or another. Those of us who, will kind of be like, ho hum, we knew this all along. And then there are other people who, and on and on down the spectrum. What is your feeling about, people getting up the next day, going to work, kids going to school, life going on? Because, the bottom line is that, life continues. And what in your view? Yeah, what's going to
first of all, if they're smart, they'll do it on Friday. Right? I'm going to do it on Friday because nobody's going to want to go to work the next day. And that'll give the media a whole weekend to just blast away and have a ball. And people will be glued to their sets for 2 days. And that'll be good. So if they're smart, to do it on a Friday. Mm-hmm. Individually, the spectrum of reactions will be infinite. Yeah. Collectively, I think the overall reaction will be one enormous excitement in anticipation. Very positive. Thrilled, ecstatic, amazed, astounded, eager, hungry. And that interaction will last for a while. The more complex concerns will emerge in due course. Questions will be raised, and people will start to dig in, their trenches, dig their foxholes for their various positions on it, establish their turf, because there's a whole lot of change coming, and money is going to change hands, and policies are going to be made, and naturally humans are looking for their piece of the action, and there'll be plenty of that going on. But the overwhelming response is going to be positive, and not only in the U.S., but worldwide. And the government, with very little effort, can maximize that by maximizing the upside to all this. And the upside is that technology. And so if the government is smart, they will certainly bring the technology into play immediately. Now, whether they do that, I think they should do it on the first day. I think that they should clearly indicate that the release of this information makes it possible now to begin a process of development, civilian-based development for technology that we have garnered from vehicles that we have collected, and that is hugely positive. I mean, it certainly is a rather intense statement to make, and it opens up a lot of cans of worms. But that's what the people want to hear. There's some dramatic solutions, like dramatic possibilities. I think stem cell research. People talk about it. They get very excited. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that could benefit from that research, and so they look positively on it and they get excited about it. Some people are questioning it, but without getting into the fetal stem cell issue, stem cell offers unbelievable potential change and help in the medical field. So magnify that by 1,000, and you've got the ET tech issue. It offers hope. And so I'm anticipating one hell of a weekend, and I think you're going to see very positive reactions worldwide. Later on, the more complicated and perhaps darker stuff will emerge, and there is stuff there. There's no question. There are things that we will learn in time, one way or the other, that will upset us and concern us. But what else is new? Gee, that pretty much describes all of history, doesn't it?
Oh yes.
So fine. Now so far, all the dark stuff, whatever is there, whether we're talking about the full nature of abductions and contact and manipulation possibly, and whatever else is going on, either within the terrestrial realms or in the extraterrestrial realms. The people that have the limited number of people that have known about this, well, they've carried that burden for a long time. And they've known about it, but we didn't. Well, it's time for us to lift that burden from them. They don't have to carry it all by themselves anymore. Let the whole human race carry the burden of whatever negative components this new reality, our galactic reality brings. We'll all carry that burden for them.
Yeah, because we eventually will get to what I think. Those people out there who find this issue difficult, let's just say. Yeah. I think one of the reasons they find it difficult because they know that, down at the end of the alley are the questions about who we are, how we got here, why we're here, our place in the big scheme of things. And those are difficult questions. And of course, we have created philosophies and paradigms and I'll say it, even religions, to try to, help us understand some of these complex things. And there are going to be people who are not ready to see it in black and white.
Look, there are people that the idea of moving the school day up a little bit later so kids don't have to get up at 5 a.m. to go to school and they come home closer to them puts people into a catatonic state. I mean, that kind of change overwhelms it. Look, what can we say? Life goes on. The world changes. The world moves on. They'll have to adapt. The vast majority of people are going to be thrilled and excited about this. And when they learn some of the darker stuff, they'll deal with it. They'll incorporate it. And we'll address it as a species. But I'm not worried about industry. It will go on. I'm not worried about religion. It will go on. Politicians will go on. most of the fundamental things we do in life will go on. And hopefully, though, we'll maybe alter our worldview and make less draconian mistakes in the future. The more we know about the reality of this world, and the more accurate knowledge we have about the reality of this world, the less likely we are to make dumb decisions. I think that's a reasonable statement.
Yes.
So here's a big piece of reality that we need to figure out so that we can make better decisions about our species, about our planet, about how we conduct our affairs, because I think there's ample evidence that the human race is not conducting itself very well. It's acting very badly, and it's acting so badly that even the confines of a whole planet are not enough to mitigate the damage. And so it's time for us to grow up as a species and become adults and act like adults. Reality, just like with children, makes that happen, whether you want it or not. Mm-hmm. And so get ready to grow up, because it's about to happen. I hope that people will be as aggressive, as active, proactive, and involved as possible. Don't let this world-changing event pass you by. Don't spectate this. Get involved. Say your mind. Make your presence known. Build your websites. Run your blogs. And try to get as much reform out of this transition as you can, as much societal and political reform as possible. Try to support and don't forget the people that sought this truth outside of the mainstream for decades, without money, without support, ridiculed by their neighbors, by their friends, by their peers, and by their own government. Don't immediately line up behind the mainstream people who will jump out and say, I'm the expert. I know all about it all along. I just couldn't tell you that. Make sure the people that have shoveled and carried the water get to be a part of this new reality and help shape the new world. And hope for the best. I'm optimistic overall. I get down sometimes because the work is difficult.
Right.
But what else is new? I mean, all activism is hard. It's no more difficult than most of the other activist movements that we've known about. Maybe even easier in a lot of respects. But I'm optimistic and excited that where things could go. But my biggest concern is that another example of bad behavior will jump up and bite us, and we'll table everything. Mm-hmm. You can't do that when you're a kid. You can't say, well, actually you do. It happens. A child will literally put off growing up because some terrible thing happens, right? And they literally stop maturing, stop growing. But overall, no. I mean, the house burns down, you're still going to grow up and become an adult, 20 years old, right? You lose a leg, you grow up, you become an adult. Mm-hmm. So we're going to grow up, we're going to want to or not. And so we have to accept that and get ready for it. But somebody may blow something up. Somebody may nuke a city, invade a country, and create a massive mess. And the powers that be are going to say, oh, God, we have to table everything. Everything's got to be put on hold. We got to deal with this crisis. We'll have to keep that truth embargo going for another 1, 10, 5, 15 years, whatever. Right. Huge mistake. Don't do it. That's my biggest concern. And I'm not going to give you, there are several likely scenarios that worry me, but I don't want to get into them because I don't want to create a kerfuffle here. But most people can figure it out for themselves. There's any number of things that could happen that would just throw everything into a cockpit. We don't want that. So let's keep your fingers crossed that nothing like that happens. And if something does happen, hope that the people will not allow themselves to be manipulated by events and told, okay, well, we can't do that now. We have to do this, and that has to be tabled, and that can't happen, and everything else, so that people in power can have an easier time of it. I really think it's time for the people to have an easier time and for the people in power to have a harder time. They need to work harder, try harder, and be more effective, and we need to be the recipient of that hard work. That would be a change, but it would be welcomed. But that's a larger picture. Right now, we're just focused on one thing. Let's end the truth embargo, and let's move on.
Well, absolutely, and if you're right, and I certainly hope that you're right, we're right on the edge. I mean, we could be a month or less away from changing the world as we know it, potentially, hopefully, for the better. Are we still encouraging people to continue with the faxes and the emails and letters? What tell folks what they need to do?
Yeah, they need to go to either fax. They need to go to the website faxonwashington.org and get the basic information to send a letter to the president regarding this issue. It's all right there. Or on Facebook, they can go to the Million Fax on Washington Facebook page, group page, and the information is right there. But ultimately, you want to send a letter, fax, and email to the president, calling for disclosure, calling for the technology to be revealed, calling for congressional hearings, calling for the president to be fully briefed of all information, not just what the military intelligence people think he has a right to know. He has a right to know it all. But the information is right there. Everyone helps. Everyone matters, particularly letters. Letters are the most powerful. Everyone's opened. Everyone's read. We also hope you'll come to the X conference in Gaithersburg, Maryland, April 17 through 19, and support the speakers and the efforts there. The website is x-conference.com. The main site for all of my work is paradigmresearchgroup.org. My co-author Grant Cameron's site is presidentialufo.com. By the way, the X conference is, in addition to some wonderful speakers, it's hosted by Cheryl Jones, who's a former CNN news anchor.
Okay.
And she's done it now every year. She does a wonderful job. And that gives you an idea of the quality of the people that are getting involved in all this. And then, get ready for the book, UFOs and U.S. Presidents and UFOs, The Secret Story. We're going to be promoting that heavily because we want to get as much support as possible to get that book on the bestseller list, maybe even the top of the bestseller list, so that it'll be reviewed, so it'll be taken seriously, so it will impact the power centers between Washington and New York. So we're looking for a lot of people to buy that book when it comes out, pre-order it from the bookstores, not from the websites, not from the Amazon.com. All the bestseller lists are based on bookstore sales, and the bookstores need your support anyway. I love them, and I hate to see them go away.
Right.
These are some of the projects that I'm involved in, Grant's involved in, and we, of course, have, if you go to paradigmresearchgroup.org, the main page, PRG page, you can see lists of the other initiatives underway. There are dozens of them, scores of books, websites. There's over 10,000 links at the Paradigm Research Group website to other materials, external links. So it's a vast issue, vastly represented on the net. All you could want if you want to get involved in what is easily the most profound transitional event in all of history to date. Come on board. It's going to be one hell of a ride.
Well, folks, we've come up to the end of the program, and you can see why this is something we all need to get behind. This isn't one of those type of demographic issues that affect some of us and not so much. This is something that touches us all. This is something that is relevant to the entire human race. So you really need to get behind this, investigate this, go to the websites, visit the Paradigm Research Group. If you can attend the X conference, please do that. Please be on the lookout for Stephen's book, because essentially it's going to be a who's who of the disclosure issue. Stephen, what I want to ask you to kind of hang on the line until we're off the air, because I have a word or two for you off the air. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest tonight has been Mr. Stephen Bassett, founder of the Paradigm Research Group. You can find out more at www.paradigmresearchgroup.org, or you can go to www.faxonwashington.org. And for the